The officials are ready. The fighters are in the ring, and they are ready. So for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to the DJ Scottos What, Why Now podcast, where I'll be inviting special guests onto my show to ask them questions about their life and success stories. For this week's episode, I wanted to invite another special guest to find out about his childhood, the start of his love in playing in goal, wanting to be a rock star, overcoming imposter syndrome throughout his career, how he's handled the challenges with leaving school without a degree, the secrets of the 22 years success as a CEO at Taylor Francis, including the growth from 18 million to 500 million turnover, what he's been up to since leaving in 2017, and his plans for the future. I am really excited to introduce our very special guest today. Let's make some virtual noise, Roger Horton. Thank you, Roger, for joining my podcast. Firstly, how are you, by the way?
I'm well, thank you. Happy old git.
So, just out of interest, what does Roger Horton do on a Friday today? What's the kind of your normal day-to-day stuff?
Honestly, no typical Friday. In fact, I banned weekdays and weekends. There's just days now, which is a different way of looking at it, I suppose. It really does vary, Scott. Everything from the mundane, which is what everyone has to do, including shopping and everything else and those sort of things. Of course, when you get old, you have to go to the doctors more often. I'm playing the odd game of golf on a Friday, but not a lot. Playing a bit of music, not a lot. Being out in the garden, being on the river. My wife and I like to travel quite a bit, so it's just a mix of all things.
How's the handicap? Has it got better?
You haven't played with me then, have you? So it's no. I mean, even Pete Rigby can wipe the floor with me, so I'm really not that good.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So before I start asking questions, just for everyone that's listening, can you please make sure you subscribe, like, share, leave comments in the chat. I promise you right now, I am looking at every single comment. So far, the feedback's been amazing. And the idea of this is something I want to do sort of going forward. Where were you born and where were you brought up?
Right, well, I'm Berkshire born and Berkshire bred, strongly arm and thick in the head. I was born in a council flat, kind of at the time on the wrong side of town a little bit, but yeah, I was literally born in the council flat as well. I don't actually remember much about that day, but apparently it all went all right. And so I grew up and then moved to council house, and my dad was a local government officer. My mum was a stay-at-home mum. I have one older sister. It was, as they say, humble beginnings, but you don't know that when you're that age, do you?
You don't. So what was it like growing up around there?
Oh, it was fine, really. I mean, obviously I was handcuffed to with a manacle to our garden, so I wasn't allowed to go out and play with the kids, because I was, just a soft young thing, really. But it was fine. I went to it really wasn't a particularly rough area. It just happened to be that we were in council housing. And I went to the local schools, nothing special, just a normal childhood.
So so you mentioned you've got one sister. So what memories do you have of her, them growing up? What's your relationship like?
Well, I don't know about anyone else who's listening to this, but my sister and I have never actually really had an argument, never had a falling out, and still haven't done even when both my parents died. Everything was good. But it would also be true to say that when we were younger, then I'd be outside all the day playing football, and my sister would be inside all day doing whatever she did inside. So to be honest, it wasn't, there's no problem, but no great close relationship either in the sense of activity-wise. Still lives relatively locally, has been a lot more poorly than me in recent times, but all good.
Oh, good. So any favourite memories of your childhood?
No, it's funny. One of the things I don't know what's the youngest you are that you can remember back. But I actually remember. People don't believe me, but I actually remember standing up in my cot in Frensham Green, which was where the council flat was, and I can remember having a conversation because my mum and dad were going to a wedding, which was I think her stepbrother's thing, and I can actually remember the moment. Then I can remember being pushed along round the road on the next door neighbour's motorbike as he walked home, things like that, and a canned bottle of coffee in the neighbour's flat. And that always had that as a with chicory. People of a certain age remember those sort of things. Yeah. But I remember that, and I could only have been, I don't know, 15 months maybe.
Wow. I think I remember about 5 or 6, but that's pretty impressive, actually.
It is, but I can't remember anything I had yesterday now,
though. So with regards of sort of being a child, when you were a child, then obviously you mentioned about being 15 months old, what did you want to be and why?
Well, I don't remember what I wanted to be when I was younger, because when you were younger, if you were at school, if they asked you, you had to say a train driver or a fireman, because that's what everyone said. I don't think I really had any sense of it. As I grew to a point where you really seriously start to consider what you want to do, then I think at that time, I wanted to be, on the serious side, I probably wanted to be in advertising or something similar to that, because I thought it was probably a bit sexy. Or I wanted to be a rock musician and play in a band, or a professional footballer. Those were somewhat of a stretch of imagination, but
good to be ambitious.
Well, I'm not playing football anymore, as you know, but because I think events in 2013. But I actually I'm still playing in bands now, so I'm still, these days, because I love rock and roll, playing rock and roll. I'm a bass player. So these days, I can just play the same bass line backwards, forwards, fast or slow, and it all seems to work.
Well, yeah, we'll come on to 2013 and also a bit more about your well, you wanted to have a rock career and stuff. With regards to your parents, what impact did they have on your career?
Do you know, talking about memories, I suppose really my dad was, being a local government officer, he was a teacher's salaries officer for Berkshire. In other words, he negotiated all the teachers for their salaries, or applied and administrated it anyway. My mum was able to stay at home. My sister was a librarian in the local college. And I just remember, without doubt, I can remember going into my careers officer at school and I'm saying, ask me what my dad did and what my mum did and what my sister did. And at the end of it, they said, I think you should be either a teacher or a librarian. And I said, I think you might be missing the mark there. And so my dad very much did want me to go into teaching. It's something which I do genuinely enjoy. And I think actually part of any leader's work should include the fact that you can do the ability to teach, because that's actually part of that is listening as well as imparting. So yeah, I kind of was pushed along that sort of route. I mean, my daughters now, one's a dance, has a dance and theatre school thing in the local area. My other daughter is a working actor.
Oh wow! Okay.
But the thing is that when I was at school, no one ever suggested anything like that. I mean, I'm as big a tart as they come when it comes to giving me a stage and a microphone or a guitar or anything. I don't care. I can talk and act and perform and all the rest of it outlandishly badly. But nowhere at school did they ever. I don't know about you, but no one ever said to me, "Have you thought about going to drama school? Or have you ever thought about doing music college?" Never. It was just like, be a teacher or be a librarian.
You'd be quite surprised. I was very shy at school, and there was drama, but I wasn't very good. But funny enough, my wife's a teacher and in performing arts, so I can relate to some of the things you're saying. And with regards to listening, she always catches me out where I'm not listening. So I'll be sort of pretending to listen. Yeah, I'll be pretending to listen, and she'll go, "What did I just say?" I'm like, So I always get caught out. So that's where the skills of being a teacher is. With regards to your two daughters, actually, what's the most proudest moment you've had so far with them both?
Oh, crumbs! Too many to mention, and whilst I could pull out the sort of the bigger issues, I mean, Amy's my eldest daughter, for instance, is just finishing a first national tour with a theatre company where she's one of the 3 lead parts. Fantastic. Comes back for 2 weeks and goes off to be in pantomime. My younger daughter is, from scratch, has built up schools, after school groups and summer schools and all that sort of thing. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Actually, but it might sound a bit soft, but I'm just proud of who they are.
That's amazing.
Absolutely love them to bits. And And the reason I've got 3 tickets to Reading Football Club is because when we were young, we used to have Dad and Daughter's Day. And some of my proudest moments are just walking down, having been to Pizza Hut with hand in hand with my little girls and sitting and watching football.
Obviously at Reading.
Obviously at Reading.
Obviously at Reading. We'll come on to Reading as well. And talking about, well, I can actually imagine, by the way, before I ask the next question, was your house very lots of performances in the lounge, and it sounds like you've got very creative, impressive daughters. So I can imagine your house must be like performances going on all the time.
Well, looking back from when they were much younger, it was because they're both obviously left home now. One's 35 and the other one's 33. But looking back though, when they were much younger, and I've been looking back at all the old little videotapes and things, and most of them are actually either sort of Christmas or birthdays, or actually in fact them doing these little plays and things. And at Christmas time, I'm genuinely a joy. I was absolutely knackered by the end of it. But my wife Deborah, Deborah's got quite a big family, and they all used to descend on us. And the routine was that they all had to dress up in stupid costumes, and we'd end up doing plays in the lounges. It was great fun, absolutely great fun.
So talk about your wife. How and where did you meet?
Her dog introduced us at church. How about that?
Okay, give a bit more.
Yeah. So from my late teens from there on in, I was very strongly involved in what's called the Free Church, if you like. And in that church, there's a lot more young people, perhaps, than most people think of being in typical churches. And so I was doing various things, including playing in the church band and preaching and teaching, that sort of thing. Anyway, one day, the sister of someone who of a couple of people in the church was started to come into church, and I confess I did glance in her direction. And then after church one day, her dog, who she had tied up in the vestibule, came bouncing up to me, and that's how we got talking. And we actually, from the time I proposed to her, we got married 3 weeks later.
Wow.
37 years ago.
So if that dog jumped up with somebody else, would that person be married to your wife now? I'm just wondering if that was it was a dog moment.
It was a canine agreement. There was no withholding it. It had to be done. So I had no choice. Brilliant.
So, by the way, I love that story. So how long have you been together for now then?
About 36, 37 years.
Wow.
Of which, of all the time we've known each other, it's been the same amount of time pretty much, because we really did meet each other very quickly. I was sort of 30 odd. I know I was 29 at the time, so really there wasn't a lot of time left for me to find anyone. So, she kindly took me on.
Okay, actually, we'll ask then, what's the secrets to for a long marriage like that, Roger? Obviously, that's a long time. It's quite rare now, isn't it, to be honest? What's the secrets?
Do you know what? It is quite rare, and it's sad. Isn't that sad, though, that it's quite rare? I mean, most of the boyfriends and partners and things that have come across our threshold for my girls, I would say that quite a small proportion have actually had parents that are still together, which is a shame. Look, the old joke about I've been happily married for 10 years. I've been married for 30 odd years, but I've been happily married for 10 of them. It's kind of, it's not smooth road, is it? I mean, there are times when, like everything in life, it gets a bit tough, it gets hard. The question, what do you want to do about it? And, you work through it, and fortunately, we're good friends as well. So it doesn't work. But it's not everyone. I think also, Scott, I think people look at you and they think, oh, they see the lifestyle, they see the girls, see them, say, oh, it's all easy. It's, they've got the perfect. It isn't. Nothing, whether it's property, money, whatever, that guarantees absolutely nothing. You've got to really work hard at this stuff.
You mentioned your wife there, but who is the most influential person in your life, and how did they impact you?
Oh, crumbs. There has been no single most influential person in my life, as a human being anyway. But I think there's been a few characters when you look back along the path of where you've come that have made most difference to being who you are. And there was a guy called Des who was my then this is a long time ago. Bear in mind how long I've been married. I actually was engaged for quite a while, and I used to go and live down in Godalming, down in Surrey, at weekends with my then girlfriend and her parents, just at weekends. And he was one of the most amazing guys. Sometimes you meet these people who are the most amazing people.
Yeah.
He really became a very strong mentor for me, and actually enabled me to, if you like, break out of some of the bounds of I was kind of held by very conventional. I was brought up very conventionally, and I was quite regulated. Dinner would be at 1 because that's when we always had lunch, sort of. And in my own way of thinking about things, I didn't get how much difference it means by being nice to people as opposed to just being what you wanted. And this guy, so there's people like that, Des being one of them, who really have made a real difference to you. And in different ways you come across people who do have that impact. And obviously we've already talked about my wife and in many ways my girls too. They all have a real bearing. And I don't think there's been any one single person, but sometimes it turns around. A very quick story on this one is in terms of it links career and personal stuff together. And that is that when I was a teenager, I used to work in a petrol station at weekends, putting gas in cars, right? Back in the days when people used to put it in for you rather than you going to the pump yourself. And this guy used to come in every week, and he used to start bringing me copies of the bookseller. And the bookseller is the organ of the book trade. I'm not quite sure which organ, but anyway, it's the organ of the book trade. So there are rumours. Because I just said to him I was quite interested in getting into publishing. And he lived in the village. And he brought me that in. And then, amazingly, I decided I really wanted to go into publishing, which is what I was doing for a long time. Went into publishing, brilliant. And turned out in my second job that the guy who brought me in, those booksellers, was just leaving, had just left a job which I wanted in McGraw-Hill. And then when I joined McGraw-Hill a few years later, he was the managing director, my boss. Now that's brilliant. Wow. But that's not the end of the story, because I'm sorry to say, the end of the story is the actual fact that two things then happened. One is that I then got to be managing director at Taylor & Francis, before I became chief executive. And he phoned me up one day and said, is there any chance you could give my son an interview? So he employed me, and I ended up employing his son. Wow. I then encouraged him to get back to playing his saxophone, and now he's a saxophone player in my band. So life goes on around and around. Do
you know what though? That's kind of that cliche people say, it's a small world, but that, like you say, just sometimes it's not say who you know, but it's those conversations randomly. But you mentioned about you wanted to get into publishing, but what was the moment that sort of like, because that's quite a bit random, isn't it? I want to get into publishing. What was it?
Well, it was a progression. I mentioned earlier on that I fancied going into advertising, and I realised that advertising was really cutthroat, and that you tended to, you didn't necessarily stay in jobs for any longer than a Reading manager does, or a Crystal Palace manager does. You knew that there was only a limited time before something else came along, before you were no longer the flavour of the day. And when I started to do that, I don't know why it linked me into, but then from advertising, I went to think about publishing. And I really just liked the idea that there was something that actually meant something, because as we go through this chat, you'll find that I like to do things where I believe there's a reason or a purpose or a good thing to come out of it. It's not just for monetary gain or just to pass the time. So publishing seemed to me something where you could get from the beginning of the process right through to the end of the process. So from idea through to book and publish it and sell it. So there was a completion. There was something about it, a life cycle, which just appealed. Right. And I, funny enough, was going to see this at the time girlfriend down in Surrey. I had lost a piece off my motorbike at the time and had to take a train. Met someone who was at school with, who worked at Van Nostrand Reinhold, who introduced me to publishing, and there I was.
Wow. You mentioned Des before about how you sort of like your mentor, you sort of became quite regimented. Have you carried that, Roger, throughout your career? So that's things that you've used in your work and socially, personally. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, well, Des was a great guy from the church. He and I used to go and preach and things together as well. And so he became a real friend. He supported Portsmouth. So whilst he wasn't, yeah, at least he understood football. But I mean, the point. But we had such a real intense relationship in terms of friendship, as basically my girlfriend's father. But that relationship stayed right through, way past until a few years ago. Sadly, he died through lung cancer. But the intensity of that friendship and the wisdom and the perseverance and the long suffering and the patience and the ability to always find good in people, I think those sort of lessons should and do usually stick with you. And you know what? There's no real difference. I mean, the thing is, I don't think there should be a difference between personal life and business life. You shouldn't be two different people. No. You should be kind of the same person, really. Whether that's good or bad, you should be kind of the same person. And I found too that from the times that I was involved in leading house groups and church groups, all that kind of stuff, is that the principles you use there are exactly the same ones in business, and they're not different. But they weren't for me anyway.
Yeah. And actually, do you know what? It's quite rare to continue being friends with parents after you break up with their girlfriends, right? Normally it's like, you are not talking to any of my friends and family ever again. Yeah. So that shows you that obviously the guy he was, that he put that bit aside, regardless of whatever happened, that you stayed friends.
That's great. It is great, and that's the way. It's like with Steve, the guy who now plays sax and banjo. The people that you form a kind of a real understanding of, and that really kind of works. So yeah, so there's a couple of mentors, Steve, I guess, and there's over the years.
Yeah, and regard to the band. So when did that love for playing instruments and did you have a band back when you were younger?
Yeah, sixth form. I played my first band was in the sixth form. And in fact, I'm still in one of the bands I play in. One of the guys in there is still the same guy I played with back in sixth form days.
What was the name of the band?
Well, back again, I can take about half an hour on this.
No, that's okay. It's all right.
The first name of the band was called Exodus, right? We wanted to be a rock band, man. Yeah, but the thing was, at that stage, our main musician, the guy I was still friends with, was really would play for Reading Philharmonic Orchestra. He wasn't really that key rocker. I couldn't play guitar at all. The drummer only could play it on biscuit tins, and that's about as far as we went. So I think we spent the first 2 years learning "Love Is Blue," which is, and we did it really badly. But we did get to it. And we realised actually what appropriate the name was of Exodus for us. Because we realised when we started playing, and people just used to walk out. So there was the mass exodus out the door. But I've been through quite a few names of bands. The current two bands, one of which is called the Slippermen.
The Sleepermen?
Slippermen.
Slippermen.
Yeah. And that's because we used to practice in my lounge here, and we had a new wooden floor down, and my wife said, "There's no way they're coming in here with their shoes on." So I said to the guys, come in, we can practice, no problem, but you've got to take your shoes off, which is kind of the rule of the house anyway now. But after a few weeks, they started to bring their slippers with them, just so that because we were old kids. So we became known as the Slippermen. So that's that one. And the other one was I was in the other band, rock and roll band, which is where my heart really is. Don't do very much of it now, unfortunately. Anybody out there needed rock and roll bass player? I'm your man.
Plug there.
I'm in. So, but that was called Midlife Crisis when I joined it. But then, unfortunately, the then bass player went off with the drummer's wife, and there was a midlife crisis for him. So I was brought in. Our singer left, and I had to find a new singer. And the new singer happens to be my daughter. So we just needed a guest singer. She came in as a guest singer. And by the end of the practice, the band said, "That's it, no more singers, that's it. We're going to have Amy now. No, we don't need any other singers. Amy's now the singer, all right? Amy is now our singer." And so everything was Amy this, Amy that. So by the end, I said, "Guys, I started this practice, and I was Roger, the bass player. Now I'm just Amy's dad. It's all about Amy, isn't it?"
Right.
That's a great name for the band, All About Amy. So
okay.
Yeah.
So do you sing?
No.
So you don't sing in the background. You don't do any.
If I sing, they hear me.
What's that?
They hear me if I sing.
Oh, okay. So you've had auditions then, but you've not made.
Yeah, no, I don't sing. My wife sings in the choir, Amy, my eldest, is actually genuinely is a really good singer, and really belts it out. She's I suppose she's she's kind of almost professional, but that's partly training as well. So she's brilliant.
So she's got the good mix then from your musical background and your wife singing.
Yeah.
What's been the, I hope I'm asking, the highlight of the bands? Anything that you're quite proud of?
Well, proudest moments or big moments in bands. Well, actual fact, yeah, I mean, played the Kassam Stadium, which is Oxford's ground. Well, it sounds great. Actually, we were in the hospitality area, but that was really good. But on that particular occasion, we actually had a guest playing with us, and he was one of the heavy rock bands back in the day, for whom nobody probably here would remember particularly. But the thing was just to have a real musician who could play two saxes at the same time on the back. It was just an amazing experience. But actually, it's kind of not that really. I think my proudest performing moment really was when both my girls and I were in the village pantomime, and so we were all doing a bit of Amdram together. And so yeah, me as the dame and my two girls, I think, were playing other significant parts in it. So yeah, just to perform actually with your own daughters is amazing.
Yeah, 100%. What's your neighbours like with the instruments going off? I can imagine, because I do a bit of DJing and stuff, and my neighbours ain't too bad, but instruments tend to go up a few more decibels. What are they like?
Well, there are two answers to that. One is that if we're playing really heavy rock or playing loud rock, we tend to actually just rent a studio these days and do it. There's a local practice place. But I'm also fortunate enough to live a bit more out in the sticks, so I don't really have neighbours that close. And the biggest compliment ever was that we were playing and rehearsing in the garage, and our neighbours said, "Oh, wow, really good last night." I said, "Oh, sorry, could you hear us?" He says, "Oh, yeah, we have got deck chairs outside by the back door, so we can listen." So very
understanding. Did they? Free listening. That's good. So again, you've kind of carried on with that love, and obviously, I think when I read, did a bit of even though I know you did a bit of research on a bit more about Taylor and Francis. Obviously, there was a bit of a love that you wanted to be a rock star, but like me as a footballer, and we're coming to football now, that dream ended quite quickly. But so talking about football, I guess we've got something in common.
Yeah.
Being brilliant goalkeepers, obviously. When I look back at some of the interviews you talked about, you were a really good goalkeeper back in the day, and I think you mentioned about you weren't the biggest. How frustrating was that being in goal then?
Oh, really? I mean, because you've never actually really been you've never had a problem with size, have you? I don't know if you were.
No, only my belly, but not height.
Yeah, well, you still block out more of the goal, don't you?
No, true, yeah.
But when I was, I don't know, when you were a young teenager, like when you were 12 or 13, were you tall in your class?
I was probably about average. I wasn't. Yeah, I was always kind of on the average tall side.
Okay, well, I got to 6 foot, but I sort of did the real spring, in sort of those sort of when I was about 14, 15, because when I first went to secondary school, I just wasn't very big. So as a goalkeeper, it meant, as you know, you just get a bit intimidated on the crosses. So I've always been a great keeper on the ground in terms of reactions and all the rest of it, and diving at people's feet. But I was never great at crosses, which is something which wouldn't be so much troublesome for you. So yeah, I think it does. I think anything in life which you struggle a bit when you're younger, it takes a while to get over that when you get older.
I guess some of the challenges you've had to sort of face, imposter syndrome. When did that start, Roger?
Well, look, I didn't even know the term existed until the last few years. So it was something which you were aware of, but I didn't know it was a term. I think probably it starts from, I wouldn't say I think everyone who assumes someone who can talk or who seems very confident and got together, that's who they are. Well, the reality is that many of us, have another side as well. We're not as confident as maybe you always seem. And for me, coming into publishing, which I was really fortunate to get in, I came in through sort of sales and marketing side of it, and then went into editorial and all the rest of it. But I never went to university. Now that was kind of because I didn't want to be honest. and kind of because I didn't really work hard enough at school, I was too busy playing in bands or writing the school review and doing that kind of stuff. So I had a blast in the sixth form, but I certainly didn't get very good grades. And so I did feel within publishing, particularly as I was coming up through middle management, it's that period when you're just starting to realize that, there is a career for you here and you're going somewhere.
Yeah.
But then when it came to getting most senior jobs, I was probably the only person in the room who didn't have a degree or hadn't been to university. So whether anybody else thought it, I don't know, but I certainly thought it. I had one boss say to me that, that would hold me back. But he did make me managing director a little while later. So, but he gave the job first of all to the person who did have the degree, who was then fired.
How did you feel about that at that time?
I was a bit miffed, but you trouble is you start to believe it a little bit. You start to believe, maybe that's how it's going to be. In fact, when I was made managing director at Taylor & Francis by then boss, who also sadly has died. I loved him to bits, Tony Selby, and Bob Kiernan was the chair. A really, really nice guy, for those that have come across him. In the first board meetings, I've just been appointed. So Tony Selby, who was a good London lad, and said it how he thought it. He said, so anyway, this is Roger Horton, and I'm pleased to say I've made him managing director. Of course, if it doesn't work out, I'll make a change. And that was my introduction to the board. And Bob Kiernan, he says, you're on good ground there, Roger. So, so I did kind of feel that. And that imposter syndrome is that. But you see, I heard someone else the other day say that the imposter syndrome for them, where you believe that you'll be found out, basically, where you think that other people will know that you're not as good, and that there will come a point where you'll only advance so far, and then they'll go, oh, yeah, but now we know you're not any good. A bit like when you play football, for me, as a small guy, everyone else seemed taller. Right? If you play against a team in red, they always seem bigger. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what it felt like a bit with imposter syndrome. You don't really have the confidence in yourself that other people seem to have in you. So, yeah, it's a bit of a struggle. I heard someone the other day interviewed, and they said it became my superpower. And I think I thought, that's really interesting. But actually what she was saying, and I would absolutely agree with this, and that is that you can turn it around, and the qualities make them qualities which actually make people respond better to you, and that feel more comfortable in your presence. So as I went up to become chief executive, from where I come to there, it was amazing, and then didn't expect to get to there. Yeah. But having got there, you can start to use those qualities where actually you genuinely think other people are good. So it was very, very helpful in managing a team of very skilled people. So I just really thought they were all probably better, and their opinion was really worthwhile having. So they would be going, oh, that's really good. He takes hold of our, he listens to our opinion. He asks us what we think we should do. And then they felt that was actually a strength of my leadership. Actually, it was a sign of my imposter syndrome, saying, well, what should we do then? But you build on that, you become confident with it. And so, yeah, in one occasion, I won't say who it was because it will be unfair for me to say who it was. But it was somebody whom I presumed had the status and the intellect and the ability, basically, to run the world if they wanted to. And he said to me, yeah, I suffer with it as well. He said, and funnily enough, nearly all of the creative and good people, all the top leaders, when you actually take them into a corner, they'll all say, yeah, I've got it as well. So I think actually you can make it a superpower, and that's what I've tried to do.
Well, it's obviously been a superpower because we'll go into some of your highlights and stuff. But you mentioned about you started as MD and then became a CEO. How did you get the role? I know you mentioned about your introduction to the board, which sounds a bit crazy. I think we've modernised that now, but because that would be a little bit awful. Yeah. But how did you get the role? How did it come about?
Well, some people chop and change companies, careers, whereas I'm actually, again, perhaps a sign of my childhood, quite consistent. I try to be quite consistent, so I tend to stick around a little bit. And I think that in the way in which many organisations and publishing and so on have changed over the last few years, where lots of people are buying each other up and lots of amalgamations and so on, every time I was at a company, I was at the first one, Van Nostrand Reinhold, for 10 years. I was at McGraw-Hill for 9 years, and the rest of the time I was at Taylor and Francis. But during all those times, lots of different opportunities came along. And I learned fairly early on is that, one is I really enjoy it. But secondly is that I didn't necessarily think I had to keep going up in levels. I felt like you can go up sideways and get more experience, and then you're going to find it hard. You're going to find it hard to be ignored, or harder to be ignored. So I just think it's just the ability to broaden your knowledge base, and hopefully be reasonable at it. And it's only really towards when I got the more senior appointments that I started to be, well, actually, maybe I am all right at this then. But a lot of it is I think about creating the people around you. For me, it was creating a team of people. You hear this so often, it's almost banal now to some extent. The reality is I really did try to have people working for me who were better at what they did than I ever could have been. And never was in my image. I only ever wanted people that, when I was sales director, I brought in Christoph Cheshire, much better sales director than me. Now I was a publisher at McGraw-Hill, but I have editorial directors in Jeremy North and so on at TNF who are way better than me. So, if you always have better people and they have working with you, it kind of tends to reflect. So I tended to get the reflected glory of how good they were. And then people says, well, he must know what he's doing, so we'll give him another bigger job then.
You know what? Obviously, that I did a podcast with your mate Peter, and he said some similar things to that. Obviously, again, had a good team around him like yourself, and obviously a few people left on the way. But it always sounded like he had every single moment throughout that 30 years that he had people that potentially were better, but that he felt comfortable with. And I will say, actually, looking at some of your highlights, if you don't mind me shouting out, so you were the executive director, which floated TNF on the stock exchange in 1998. Yeah. Just for people that have never done that before, I've never been involved in that, how hard is that, and at what moment was that, like a great moment, and did you feel really proud about it? What's the sort of process, keeping it sort of short and sweet, I guess? Yeah.
Well, look, in reality, floating the business, this was Taylor and Francis at the time, started in 1798. It was 1998, so it was 200 years after it had been started and had nearly folded on many times during those centuries. It was a small family publishing business, started off as printers. And myself and my fellow directors, my then managing director, which was Tony Salvi, we'll just work out, we'll never change, and a couple of other people who I remain friends with. The thing was that we could only unlock the value of the business by floating it on the stock exchange. In other words, allowing, rather than a few dusty old academics to own it, is to let the public own it, to be able to get the money for investment, and then to be able to then buy businesses, which then we were able to buy on the same year, doubled in size straight away by being able to buy Routledge. Well, before that, we would never been able to do that, and we would have been consigned to the annals of history as a small, dusty old academic publisher. But the process of doing it is astounding, actually. It's you get to see what goes on in the finance world, and you hear so many rumors about what goes on in finance and so on. It really is a world I would not survive in for 2 minutes. But it was great fun. I mean, for 3 weeks, I think it was, or 2 weeks, whatever it was, we were on the road every day trying to sell the business to all the possible investors, doing the same little spiel for an hour, just in a car being taken around, doing it time after time after time after time. It was astonishing. By the end of it, it just tried the will to live. But yeah, it was great. It was and well worth it. I mean, it was from a personal point of view, in terms of myself, my family, ability to provide for them, was the key moment that changed our lives.
You talked about having people potentially better than you. That's when you need those people for something like that. And like I say, I've never been on the level you guys have had, but listen to a few people that have. It's so important to have that core people that know what you're talking about, but not just about talk about, can sell that to investors and stuff. And that's really important. And then 2004, I guess this was the one you probably are most proud of, is when Peter comes in, and and you do a merger. Is that right? That's right. Saying merger with Informa in 2004. What changed? Obviously, without the obvious, it was a massive change. But what impact did that have on you and Taylor Francis?
Well, it had a massive impact, really, in many ways. We were probably swallowed up as a small, but decent publisher anyway. Informa was, as you know from your side of things, basically an exhibit and a B2B type of business. It was called a nil premium merger, which meant that at the time, Informa was worth 200 million and we were worth 200 million. So technically, there was no difference in it. But when you have two boards of directors, two PR at the time, of course, I was a PLC director. When you have two boards of directors, when you have one boardroom instead of two, you haven't got room for everyone. So there was various trade-offs. It's always done.
Right.
So, at that point is when I stopped being on the PLC board, which quite a few people told me was no bad thing. I didn't necessarily share that at the time, to be honest. It was quite disappointing for me, having just helped it float the business. But nevertheless, oddly, at the same time, as all these things have a way of going, what comes around goes around, is at that time then that we merged the book publishing and the journal publishing, which were two separate managing directors before, into one. And that's when I became chief executive of Taylor & Francis, which carried on growing with the ability for this new level of funding that we could get by being a much bigger company.
So you mentioned about I don't know, it's a bit about being kind of like stubborn, I guess, but you're both effectively equal companies.
Yeah.
How do you kind of kind of pick a football team, right? I want you, then you get down to it.
Yeah.
How do you agree that? Is it just somebody just being a little bit like, okay, all right? Is it hard?
Yeah. Yeah, and you have less, and I had less saying it than and obviously the then chief executive was David Smith of Taylor & Francis, and Pete, and I think Pete was chief executive at the time. Pete and David. They just had to bash it out, saying, okay, well, if you want to be chief executive, then I'm going to be chairman, and if you're going to have your finance director, then we're going to have ours. So it's kind of, that's the way it works. And obviously it's done with advisors and helpers and lawyers and all the rest of it. But ultimately it comes down to, standing by the side of a pitch and going, I'll have in them.
Yeah. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in those situations. And I guess there's things that you can't ever share because of the situation you're in. But was it hard coming up with a name? I know it sounds obvious because I think what was it called? TNF Informa? I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, TNF Informa. Yeah. Incredibly imaginative name, really.
How long did that take to work out? But is that hard as well? Was that the other thing to sort of agree? Well, what do you call yourself? First?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, was it going to be Informa TNF or TNF Informa? I can't remember really how it went one way or the other at the end. But what became obvious was that once you get out there and the investors go, that really is a pretty naff name, TNF. So I think, I can't remember exactly how it happened, it's just too long ago, but essentially is that I really didn't want to lose Taylor & Francis from being the publisher, because in the publishing world, in our world, the library world, we were known for that.
Yeah.
And that was 200 years worth of reputation. So I said, well, I don't care what we call the business, as long as I can carry on calling my business Taylor & Francis. And I think that's when the view was taken, well, but Informa is a much more kind of just general name. It kind of works, information inform or whatever. So let's have that as the overall group name. And throughout, and I suppose probably if you talk to some of my other colleagues, they'll tell you that I was a pain in the ass, because I was always very much say, well, leave us alone. We'll do what we need to do. And being the sort of business we were, half of our business was journals. We got all of our subscriptions in at the beginning of, or before the end, but basically the beginning of every financial year. So we already knew what we were going to have on half of the business by the end of the year. So as a cash certainty, as a real base for the group, I was able to have perhaps a stronger voice than I deserved.
No, I think Pete, again, not to talk about Pete Rigby too much because this is your podcast, but I remember him saying that you knew it was doing so well, and he wasn't completely as knowledgeable as you are about the academic publishing space, and because you were doing so well, I think he just knew you know what you're doing. Yeah. If we have problems, then we have a conversation kind of thing, which is nice, isn't it? Because it just shows that you don't want to sort of fix something that doesn't need fixing, right? So, I think that's well.
if we hadn't been doing well, then I'm sure we'd have heard a lot more. But,
Of course.
Pete is very much. Pete was as a because after Pete, I mean, that changed a few years ago. I mean, it was in 2013, I think, actually.
That's right, yeah.
When Pete left. And therefore there was a whole new era after him. But when he was there, he used to leave us very much to it. And as long as everyone was happy and comfortable, then he would give you the feeling that he was just a mate and not your boss. And I think that's the reason why everyone would often be prepared to be nailed to a sort of a cross or something on behalf of him, just because he's a mate. And an event which you were always at, by the by, which was of course the annual football match against the Dutch. Well, I can remember Pete saying to me one year, "Well, lad, we better have a bit of a meeting then beforehand. So we'll join me for a cup of coffee then before the game." So he and I went in Medeski Stadium, went off into a room, and he says, "Right, so business all right?" I said, "Yeah." "Good. Any problems?" "No." "Ah, good." He said, "Let's go play football then."
Do you know what though? Sometimes people overcomplicate meetings, don't they? You have these one-to-ones and best practice and stuff. But look, at the end of the day, you could go through all this stuff and be micromanaged. But at the end of the day, that's not the best to get out of you. He knows you well enough, and you're obviously still friends now. So from what you're saying, so you keep in touch.
Yeah.
Obviously, as we all know, Roger, things aren't perfect, but you did oversee a business that went from 18 million to 500 million in turnover during so that's an amazing achievement. Like I said, Peter again, not to about him, but there obviously are difficult times, right? So what would you say was the hardest and challenging time throughout your career there that you don't mind talking about?
We were very lucky. The great thing about academic publishing is it's pretty consistent. It doesn't change dramatically because unlike the world which you're in, which was a bit more volatile and was a bit more sort of massive changes in a year, we didn't have that. So in a sense, from a business point of view, as long as we could carry on buying businesses, and I think probably, I don't know how many, actually, do you know what? I really don't know how many businesses or lists or pieces of business I bought.
I think you got 100 down on here, acquisitions completed.
Yeah.
Probably more than that, right? 100 sounds good.
Count that and prove I'm right or wrong. I have no idea. Right from the size of, from the 200 million ones we did, right down to the sort of a few lists and a few pieces here and there. Oddly, it was often the bigger ones were the easier ones to buy than the smaller ones. With the guy who started a business up and didn't really want to sell it, but so on. So those things were always a challenge, and there were challenges within it. I think probably the most difficult time for me was when we had to move out of London because we were in a building in New Fetter Lane.
Right.
And the book business was still there. That was the old Routledge building. We were moving out of London to Milton Park, which is where the journal business was partly there and partly in Abingdon, which is nearby. And that was really, really difficult because being a very unionised house, Routledge as was, that we had people going on strike and people with banners outside and everything else. And
oh, really? Wow.
And it was really, and it was very, very hard. The people that you work with, some of the people we work with, who were the union representatives, it was a challenge. I don't think there's ever very many really angry words, but it wasn't easy and it wasn't pleasant, and I didn't like messing around with people's lives. But sometimes you have to mess around with businesses, it seems, because unless you can survive and be more successful, then you can't carry on employing and growing the other people you want to. The aim was always to grow the business, and if you grow the business, then you need more people. But that was probably one of the toughest times, made me even more tough in a way by the fact that my HR director at the time, who'd come from production, a guy called Simon Franklin, not long after he moved to Milton Park, then died of a heart attack. Not as a result of that, but was very difficult. And I had the privilege of doing the service, which was sort of kind of another little.
That's tough, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all about people. It's about the people. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't the easiest of times.
Well, so I guess the other thing, just on that, moving from London to an office in London is always a challenge. But to move outside of London, I guess, where these people are, I guess that's always the battle, right? But But you had to make that decision based on the business, and yeah, it works out sometimes for some, works out for others. Actually, 2013, a near-death experience, right? I don't know all the details about it. I remember us going to football. Sorry, Roger's in a really bad way. He could die. I was like, what? So, would you mind explaining, Roger, what happened and from start to finish again? Like, you know, because I think like that's unbelievable to see where you are now and what could have happened back then.
Yeah, 2013. Over a period of over a couple of months or so, what we thought at first was a bit of sciatic pain became so intense that I just didn't look like me. And I was on a morphine pump, which is where you can actually just sit there and pump morphine into yourself. That's how much pain I was in. It was excruciating, whereby I came close to collapse. I was on so many drugs, and then they were trying to work out what was wrong with me, including giving me PET scans and everything else. And at the time, I didn't know a PET scan basically was looking for cancer. Apparently, the specialist told me later that he thought I was riddled with cancer in the back, but it wasn't. It turned out to be, and this is really quite strange, I suppose, really, the fact is that I was actually kind of able to diagnose it and help my neurologist work out what it was wrong with me because of journals. I was able to do research on journals, and I found out the main articles on something that seemed similar, and I contacted the Mayo Institute in America, which is the finest research medical hospital in America, and they emailed me back, and we talked about it, and I said to my neurologist, I think it's something like this, which is something called lumbosacral radioplexus neuropathy, which basically means that all of the little nerves that come down through your back and then out down your leg, they will have a little bit of insulation around it, a bit like a telephone wire. If you go into a telephone junction box, you see all the little wires, and they're in a cable themselves. Well, each of those little tiny wires and the outer cable itself had all become inflamed and was squeezing to the point where it was causing me such intense pain, which eventually had the outcome of those nerves in my leg dying, so hence the end of my playing in goal. But what I didn't, what was
sorry,
the
end? To laugh there. Sorry, it was just the goalkeeper bit that you mentioned there.
Yeah, well,
what about your health? But the goalkeeper bit was the main bit.
Yeah, well, I just got to remember this. There's in selecting, you and I were the two goalkeepers, right? So there was two factors to play. One was ability, and one was power, right? I don't know which of us was the better goalkeeper. We probably both think we were to a certain extent, but the reality is that you could play on the pitch and I couldn't.
Yeah.
Right. So on ability terms, you have abilities elsewhere that I didn't have. So and the second thing is about power. Well, I was the boss, so I played in goal.
Exactly.
But
we were very supportive of each other, weren't we? Actually, sidetracking there.
We really were. But anyway, so this illness, try and make this really short. Behind a lot of these illnesses, that when you end up spending months, like a month or two in hospital, is that the silent killer comes in. It's more known about now, but I ended up having septic shock. Septic shock is on from sepsis, which is basically blood poisoning, which came from infections I caught within hospital. And I collapsed early one Monday morning, having refused to go into hospital the night before, although I had raging temperatures and stuff. I thought I was all right. My wife came into the bathroom and found me collapsed on the floor early in the morning. And thank goodness that actually, being an old git, that I actually had to go to the loo. Because if I hadn't have gone to the loo, I would never have woken up. Because when you have septic shock, when it gets that far, there's like 6 hours. During those 6 hours, all your body closes your organs down. So it knows there's a problem. It closes all your organs down in turn to try and work out what it is and try and stop it. But it will then eventually close down your heart. So everything closes down. And I was halfway through that. And when I was taken to hospital, I don't remember much about it. Apparently I was functioning normally, because the brain takes over and pretends nothing's wrong. In hospital, my wife was saying, well, prepare yourself. There's a 50-50 chance you're not going to come through this. God. So she had to wait outside while they stapled things into my neck and everything else. And,
I remember you in hospital for a while, though, weren't you?
Yeah, well, no, it's what it was, a month, 6 weeks, something like that, on and off. But then I came back. What I didn't know behind all of this, and this is I mean, and my PA, Jackie Benoit at the time, and others didn't actually let me know because I think it was been too much for me. I didn't know they were putting up boards in reception saying, you know, Roger is in intensive care, Roger's out of care, or whatever else. And then there was all these letters and notes which were given to me afterwards, which I have never cried so much in my life. When I read,
oh right, really? Wow.
People from China and India didn't even really even know me. Were writing things about how they'd been crying, they were upset because so on. And Pete, bless him, he keeps getting into these conversations. I do know other people other than Peter Rigby, by the way. But I remember him. He was absolutely, apparently, really distressed by it. He got on a plane in London. I think he was going to Brazil or somewhere. He said, and I was scared that when I got off the plane, he'd be dead. And it was. I mean, the impact on myself and my wife and everything else was tremendous and was awesome. And took a long time emotionally to get over as well as physically to get over. But hey, I'm well now. Every day's a blessing.
And you know what? It's a nice story to hear now. It's like you say, having support from your family, but the other thing as well, it shows you how much you're liked when something like that happens and you read that stuff. You do then find out how much you're liked.
Yeah,
you don't know that all the time because you're CEO and you make decisions, and some people, some days are like you, some days they don't. But really, take all that stuff away.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, people that are chief executives or managing directors or whatever they are, when they're at the top of the organisation, everyone assumes they're all right. But actually, it can be a relatively lonely thing. So since I retired, I like where I can to be a bit of a mentor because it is quite lonely at the top in a sense because people always assume you're all right because you're in charge.
Yeah, and actually, just the last couple of things on being a CEO, and I think you've kind of talked about it. If somebody wants to become a CEO and they're starting this process now, you've probably been asked this a lot, but what advice would you give somebody starting out?
Well, you've got to really want to do it. You've got to be prepared to count the cost of what comes with it. The odd thing is, I didn't intend to be a chief executive. I just intended to do the best I could and to get as far as I could, not knowing where that would be. You know, when I was younger, I used to have these targets of certain ages I'd be doing this, but it was that's just sort of the darkness of youth. But the reality is if you just want to do the best that you can do, then and you are prepared to accept the fact that you cannot do it all, and that you really genuinely do have to get good people around you to want to work for you, want to work with you, and you've got to be prepared to make the tough decisions. There are times when you do have to make those decisions which affect people's lives, and it's up and people will look to you for that kind of stuff, and that is not easy. And you've got to be able to separate private life from work life in that sense. Otherwise, you walk around quite weird at times. But it's great as well. It's amazing. But I actually never really felt much of a chief executive in that sense. I just felt like the guy that ran a really, really good team.
So when you talk about making big decisions, in 2017, you made the big decision about retiring effectively from TNF. What made you decide to retire then?
Well, that was coincided with my 60th birthday, which was a coincidence. But after I'd been ill in 2013, I think probably against the advice of some, and certainly probably against the better judgment of what my wife thought as well at the time, was that I just felt I needed to still prove that I could still do it. So in other words, the illness hadn't robbed me of being who I was as a career person, or me as a person. I needed to prove to myself as well as to others. So that actually coincided with Stephen Carter becoming chief executive after he had left. He was very encouraging and very helpful, and genuinely was really, really helpful. He said, if you can just give me 2 days a week, I'll take that rather than nothing.
Oh, that's good.
To say that to chief executive, amazing. So he said, just if you can give me 2 years. Well, I gave him a little more than that. I think I gave him 4 years. And nobody also expected me to retire, and I'm not sure I expected to. But I said to someone else I knew well, and this people are of a certain age, if there's anyone listening to this who's contemplating retirement, and a retirement that is self-induced rather than placed upon you, then the lesson I learned from this guy said to me, well, I said, well, how do you know when it's right? I said, I know I probably should really think, but I don't know. And he just said to me, Roger, don't worry about it. When it happens, you know. And I was in the States at the time. I had a place out in Delray Beach, and we had a business out in Boca. So I spent quite a bit of time out there, oddly in the winter. And when we were out there, I said to my wife, do you know what? I think I'm done.
You woke up, did you?
I think we just going out there. I think I'm done. She said, well, tell you what, let's just get home and, I'll ask you the question again in a few weeks' time. But it's like a threshold you cross. You get to a point where you go, do you know what? I think I've gone as far as I can go. And a lot of stuff had been happening. I've gone through the digital transformation from print through to digital with the help of the team. Business was totally transformed from where it was. But the next step on was another new set of changes. It's going to take another 5, 10, 15 years. And I just don't think I had the will or the energy to do that. And I knew, therefore, it was inside of me somehow. I knew it was the right time to hand the reins over to someone who could do it with more energy and, who could work a full week and do the whole bit, even though I was pretty much back up to speed by then. So they were very, Stephen said to me, I think you're probably one of the first chief executives who's ever willingly retired that I could think of. So that was quite nice too. So yeah, it took a while to get used to that.
It's good to leave on, not being pushed or everyone says, oh, Rogers wants to leave, but really that's a kind of PR thing. But actually,
it really was me.
That's good though. I know that, and that's nice to feel that you've kind of left on your own terms. And so you have retired. Do you have any regrets? We talk about challenges, but are there any regrets? Anything you look back and think, oh, wish we did that, or wish we didn't do that? Not the challenges, but the regrets.
Yeah. I think the only regret, which isn't something to do anything about, there was a time when we were going to be bought by Springer, and then there was a time when we were going to buy Springer, and it got so close to buying them, and we had spent literally months in a sort of darkened room, myself and the rest of the directors, planning through how we were going to do this and what it would mean, including actually what we were going to call it and everything else, and even having designing it out to see what it looked like. We really felt it was that close. And then at the time of the banking crash, it all fell away. And when it all fell away, the deal went away with it. And I think probably that was one of the most intensive times where something didn't work out. I kind of got rather used to things working out, and that was very disappointing. I think it took the rest of us on the executive team, quite a few months to really kind of get back up to speed and enthusiasm levels. That's probably the only thing. But we couldn't have predicted the banking crash, which meant the money wasn't available anymore, or various reasons it came about. So yeah, that was about the only thing. Other than that, people-wise, we all make mistakes. I would have hurt people's feelings, which I didn't like doing. I'm sure at times I got some things wrong, definitely. Those are the small things, but no, hey, it was a great ride, a brilliant ride.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the people that are watching this, rather than listening to it, Roger does not look 65 years old, by the way. You look very well, by the way. So whatever's happened for 22 years as CEO and having that life, death experience, you look really well. You do look well.
I am. I'm very blessed to be relatively healthy. I mean, I've got more bits that aren't me anymore, whether it be knee, hips, and other things, which they will work fine. It's the other bits that are left aren't so good. Yeah.
Just so obviously, as you can talk about now, you haven't retired, have you? No. You left. I don't know how much break you had, but you got yourself back into different roles and stuff. What have you done for people listening since leaving TNF?
Well, I left TNF in June 2017 on a Thursday, and on the Sunday I was in my first board meeting at Cabby, which wasn't intentional, but it's just the way it came out. Cabby is a development organisation, part publisher, part development, agricultural development in mostly in Africa and Asia and places like that. And they very quickly became my new family, if you like, in terms of business-wise.
So your wife wasn't happy that you weren't working then. So on Friday, she was like, "You better get another job." So by the weekend, you had something lined up.
Yeah, and that's just that. I have to be fair to her. She's been so supportive, so brilliant. But if anything, it was the other way around. It was like, oh, really? I'm really going to go do this? But great. So I did Cabby. I was non-exec there for a year, and then the chair left. A couple of Philip Waters, who was also publishing in the past. And so I became chair of that, and still am chair of that. But as many of you out there will know, that you can only be a non-exec in any business for a certain amount of time. So I've got a year and a half left there.
Right.
I then became chair of the BMJ, British Medical Journal, and director of the BMA, British Medical Association. And I did that for the time throughout the epidemic, funny enough. So for the entire time, I was almost the entire time chair. I never went to a meeting because we did it all virtually. So it was only after I decided that it was timed in right after 2 years of being chair to step aside for different reasons. BMJ was great. I loved it to pieces. So yeah, it was quite interesting being at the BMA which is all the doctors. It's a doctors' union essentially, or during what was going on in the epidemics. Yeah, so it was interesting. So I've sort of sprung wings out of publishing, was into sort of the medical part of the world. So now basically I am really I'm available. Anybody need me? I'm available.
Just on what you're doing now, what's the plans for the future, Roger? Because I can't imagine you are going to keep trying to get your handicap down in golf, because I think that's too late. I don't know what I'm saying. No, so I can't imagine you're going to want to sit there and watch Reading on TV every week. So what are you going to keep doing to keep busy?
The thing is, you do get to a point where you don't want to do as much or as often, and that's really kind of where I'm at. So I am at the point that like I did with Cabby and like I did with BMJ and BMAs, because I believe they were doing something good, that there's a real reason for doing it, and there would be real good coming out of it. So I'm very fortunate to be able to spend quite a lot of my leisure time with my wife here, or where we live here, or down near the coast. So we can move around a bit. If you've got 2 daughters, there's always a list of things that need to get done for them. So I really genuinely enjoy portfolio management, like lots of stuff, different things. I wouldn't want to do any one thing. I mean, guys that retire, we keep talking about golf. Guys that retire to play golf 4 times a week, it would just drive me absolutely crazy. To play once a month or something is fine. So for me, I would like to be able to keep maybe just 2 pieces of work. I do some lecturing on transformative change. Probably one of the, having talked earlier on about my imposter syndrome, for 2 days, I went to Oxford University Say Business School, and I lectured to people on 2 days. And this is a council house kid born in a flat.
That's got to be one of the big achievements then, isn't it?
Do you know what? They paid me, but I'd have paid them to do it. And I came away, people didn't realise just how important that was to me. That was in terms of my background. That was absolutely amazing. I do a bit of teaching here and there, but really and truly, I just like to have a couple of things where I can either really help people that want to grow, either their businesses or themselves, or to be a non-exec director come chair. I'm probably a better chair than I'm a director, because I'm just, I've always been better at helping other people to be better rather than me trying to do it myself. So yeah, it's not a lot. I am 65. For another 5 years, I'd love to be doing a couple of things like that during the course of a typical week.
And you know what? I've got to say, I didn't know you did that at Oxford University. That is brilliant. Like you say, you would have paid for that, but you got paid for doing it. But like I say, it wasn't about the money. It was about having the opportunity, and you've done loads of things in your career. Sometimes things like that are just as important as doing a merger of Informa or growing the business as much as you did. How do you want to be remembered?
Alive. I don't want to be remembered because I'm dead otherwise. So, but actually, in seriousness, I don't know. I've had a couple of mantras which I've always used in business life, and I think they apply to the home life as well. Basically, is do unto others as they do unto you. In other words, if I had to sack someone or if I had to promote someone, I would want to know how they felt, and I'd want to be talking to them across the desk. So I would want to be talked to. If it be me in that chair, how would I feel about it? So treat others as you want to be treated, basically. That's one of my mantras, and I hope that people will remember that. Not necessarily me, but they remember that's really important. And the second thing is that I do try to be consistent, and I think that it's not a doubt about just being consistent. It's about being consistent consistently. By that, I mean is that if you are given the astounding privilege of being a chief executive or a managing director or a sales director or whatever it is, you've been given a great responsibility for leading a team of people. And I genuinely believe that wherever I could, I would be as friendly or as open with someone who was working in the post room as someone who's working in the boardroom. I don't think there's any difference. Playing football together as we did in football, that nobody cared who did what job. And the same things if I would go to play badminton in the sports or with the company on a Wednesday, it's about being consistent with everyone in the same way. I can't stand people who don't know where you stand with them. Yeah. And I also really don't like people who are really nice to people that are above them, but not so nice to people that are below them. I just think you've got to be a real person and you've got to be it consistently. So
I've got to say, Roger, on that, being a salesperson, not been long at former, had a bit of, quite vocal in playing football, but I was quite nervous going on these trips and stuff, and especially at the beginning, knowing who you guys were, because I see you on these all charts on the internet and stuff, and that was my fear, thinking, what do I say to Peter Rigby? What do I say to Roger, the CEOs and stuff? And that's the one thing that you guys both did, and a lot of people on that trip did. There was you didn't come along with your hat, of being the CEO. You came along as one of the boys or girls to come and play whatever sport it was, and you made me feel confident and like you say, you didn't come across in a horrible way. You talked to me on the level or whatever it was. It's football. Which is most of our conversations about Palace and Reading, but you always made me feel confident and and not nervous, and that's the one thing I would say. I've always got on with you. I know we had our goalkeeper union, but we always kept in touch in different ways, and you always made me feel like just a normal person. So thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, well, brilliant. Well, that's then that's exactly what I was trying to put into words, I suppose, really. But the thing is, you've got to remember, if you've got imposter syndrome, a little bit of, like I have, I wanted to fit in with you as much as you would be surprised that I was fitting in, because you don't see yourself as the great I am. You think yourself you're going to be found out a little bit. So so in a way that's where you use it. It plays into what you can do. Now I remember you though when you were. Well, the most nervous I ever saw you was when we were on that small plane and you sat next to me, and I was trying to keep you talking about other stuff.
That is the worst. We were lucky. Well, we'll say lucky. We flew around a lot working for because of meetings and travel, conferences, exhibitions, and going to this. That flight to Eindhoven, Amsterdam, wherever it was, that is the worst flight I've ever been on. And you were fine. Maybe you weren't fine, but you were just like, talking about Reading football, and I'm going green. I'm struggling on that flight, and I think that stayed with me about 3 hours afterwards, because I remember we met people that were there, and I think my colour, my face is worse than it is now. But you were good. You were talking to me, trying to change the subject on that flight.
You thrown up on my lap, frankly.
Oh God, that was awful. So with regards to the podcast, that's in regards to questions. I think it's a good opportunity to talk about. It's all about Amy. What's the future of that? And anything else you wanna add to this, Roger? Because like I say, it's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, well, thanks, mate, and I appreciate it. Thanks for even remembering my name. Yeah, you know what? It's all the old trite things about it's not rehearsal, all the rest of it. The point is though, is that it's only as good as you get out what you put in, and I've been very fortunate that my face has fitted most of the time, and career-wise. I've been blessed by having a great family, even though obviously at times it's a bit painful and some health issues along the way and stuff like that. But it's a lot of people say to me, and even the conversations my wife and I have about, since you retired or now that you've retired, I just don't really quite understand that word. not because I actually just stopped working in corporate life. I don't see that as retirement. It's just I didn't have to go out every day and get up early. And, I mean, the thought now of going into work every day, although some would say that I didn't. Anyway, the thought of going back into work every day and doing it, I just couldn't do it. I don't have the capacity. You do. You're at an age where you're still hungry for that.
Right, last question. What's the future for Reading?
Oh, my goodness.
Club?
Well, I think...
Magic ball now. What's the future?
Okay, well, I think the future of Reading is no more certain than the informal share price at the moment. I think it's... I first went to see... This will date. I first went to see Reading in 1967 against Workington Town, and we won 2-0. As the... oh, there you go. Just coincidentally, there's the programme for my first ever game.
Oh, wow.
And that just literally happened to have that in the rack in front of me. And in that time, I've had the privilege of seeing and getting into the Premier League twice, a total of 3 seasons. And we've been hanging around. Look, Reading are never going to be high achievers. But it's a blight, isn't it? If you end up supporting a team you know are pretty rubbish, trouble is, if you really support them, I can't just not. I can't go off and watch Man United or Liverpool or someone, or Crystal Palace. I was desperate, but I can't do that. So I'm a Reading supporter. So give me a chance to see Reading versus Shrewsbury or Man United versus Liverpool. I'm going to go and see Reading. So the future isn't bright, but I'm going to be there for it.
I've experienced the ups and downs. When you've been a Reading supporter longer than I've been a Palace, I've lived it. I live it all the time, the ups and downs. We're going for a nice one at the moment, but you have been very kind to give us let me come to the box and having to shut up when Palace score a couple of goals, and that was hard. I think I got one goal. I think one game I went to was it was FA Cup, and I couldn't help it. We scored, and this guy below us went, "Get out! You can't be in the box. You should be. You should be." And that was the first time I was like, I couldn't control my emotions, and he told me off, and he told me to complain about me.
I know what that was. There's a guy called Ginger, and he used to have Ginger in on the back of his shirt. That's when they're back in the days when we had a box. But I never went in the box if I could help it. I always went in my seats, because if I was in the box, I had to be, as you said, to be in the seats. I could shout at the referee like Peter.
Yeah, and thank you, by the way, because it was the start of something good to go into a few of those boxes, and also get an opportunity to play there at Reading, and that's one of the great things of working at Informer and TNF and having the opportunity to play at Reading's ground. And I have to say, it's horrible to go to Reading ground, seeing Palace's ground. It's always also go there and think, God, why can't we have a ground like this? But that's our one thing, we're not as good as you're at. But Roger, thank you so much for this. Look, I really appreciate it as you've given your time up, and I really wish you the best of luck. And with whatever you do next, I feel like you've still got a lot of things to go. You're not retired, that's the word. Just still finding your way, because you've got a lot to offer. I can see that you've got a lot of energy, and I wish you the best of luck with the band, Reading, and your role, and obviously family life.
Scott, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks, Roger.
Episodes will be available every Saturday, so if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe and follow to receive notifications of each of my new shows. Also, make sure you like, share and comment. Thank you for listening.